Good morning, everybody. As everybody's just logging in and joining the webinar now, so we'll sort of talk quickly about ourselves before we log in and start or commence the webinar proper. But for those of you who are here, welcome to our 6th webinar. This one's called Getting Sales Teams Active. Sales teams have struggled to navigate remote sales while in lockdown. What can you do to help them rediscover their sales mojo? Or maybe what can we do to help them rediscover their sales mojo? And I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Ingrid Maynard from The Sales Doctor. Ingrid's down in Melbourne. I'm up in Sydney. My name's Richard Forrest, for those of you who don't know, from Forrest Marketing Group. Both of us this time, I think for the first time ever, this is the first time we've been both in lockdown at the same time. Not that that's anything to be proud of, but we've been running these webinars now for just over a year, I think. And it's great to see so many people tuning in and joining them. And Ingrid's going to start off the session. I'm going to ask a couple of questions of her, and she's going to give us her knowledge and share that this morning. And then we'll swap roles, and I'll get to give you some of my thoughts as well. If anybody has any questions at any time, please put those into the chat. We're very happy to try and answer those as we go. But I think we might just get started. We've got 30 minutes. We're very keen to try and keep this to a 30-minute forum or format. So Ingrid, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump straight in and talk to you and get your perspective on this. So from your side, why is exhaustion everywhere right now, and what can we do to counter it, especially in that sales role?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, good morning, Charles. Thank you for saying good morning to everyone. Good morning back to you. Look, yeah, that just seems to be a phenomenon that comes along with lockdown. There's a few reasons for it. I mean, one is that we're spending our entire day, like you and I were talking about before, Richard, in front of a screen. There's not a lot of energy coming back, and it's just sort of sucks the life out of us. Plus, we've got, so much time, like you were talking about, time on our hands. What do we do with some of that time? And, our cortisol levels are going through the roof, as the uncertainty hits. If we turn on our televisions, which I highly recommend we don't, because you're going to find out about the numbers anyway, it just adds to rising cortisol levels. So that takes out a lot of energy, and it increases our stress levels, which makes us tired, makes us emotional. It shuts down our ability to think critically, and it also shuts down our ability to take better action. So my antidote to that is to say, well, all right, if we're getting, some of those unhelpful chemicals happening in our brains, what are the helpful chemicals that we can counterbalance that with? And there's a few different ones. So I'm all for chemical enhancement, but not the kind that you might think, just more around, that natural brain chemistry that we can tap into. So there's 4 good chemicals that we should be actively cultivating and tapping into. They are endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. So I'll just quickly talk about how you can activate each one of those and why they're so important to counterbalancing that exhaustion, which is really led by, the unhelpful chemical, which is cortisol. So endorphins, we get that through exercising, and sometimes, and the purpose of endorphins is to minimize pain, to kind of enable us to not feel pain when we're pushing through a barrier or we're taking certain action. So for all of those runners out there, and I'm one of them, it's that high that you get through the act of exercising, to the point where after those endorphins start to subside again, you kind of go, oh, I've got a really sore hamstring, or, oh, I'm feeling that, which I am at the moment. But that's really the role of endorphins, but they are fantastic for making us relaxed and also giving us that emotional high. Then we've got dopamine, and this is what happens when we write goals down, we see goals, we have a vision board, we've got a set path for the future. What I would highly recommend everyone does right now is set themselves a vision for what happens beyond all of this. We know this is not going to be our future. We know that this will end at some point. So what do you want that life to look like? What do you want work to look like? And having that visual is really important. We need it in order to tap into those, into that dopamine. So writing those goals down, and then also even just on a daily basis, just writing down at the end of our day the things that we achieved, and and crossing those off, not just to-do lists, but things that you hadn't really expected. What have you learned today? What are some of the things that you've noticed about yourself? So taking that time to reflect and note those things down really starts to tap into dopamine. Serotonin is another chemical that we can induce, and that's really our role as leaders. Really taps into serotonin. This is where leaders give acknowledgement for other people's accomplishments. But you don't just have to be a leader to do that. We can do that in our team meetings, acknowledge other people's performances. And what happens is it reinforces relationships. It reinforces connection. And when we're all working remotely, that's what we need right now. We need connection. And we can recognize other people, not just for their achievements, not just for what results they've been able to bring in, but perhaps we focus on things like reinforcing or living our company values. That's a really good way to boost serotonin, and also the activity levels. Man, if my sales team was just really active right now, I'd be high-fiving them all the time, because that is the antidote to that exhaustion. And then finally, oxytocin. Now, this is the connectedness loop in our brain. So it's stimulated by acts of generosity. So if we were all, working in the office, we might buy someone else a coffee. We might give them a pat on the back. Well, okay, we're not there. So can we give a little gift, a text even, recognition, or being generous in another way that reinforces that. And when we witness that even, so this is where team meetings are really important for stimulating oxytocin. When we're being generous to one another and we're witnessing someone else being generous, it actually increases our oxytocin levels. So we don't even have to do it. As long as we see it, that increases oxytocin, which means that we actually feel more generous, which means that we're more likely to take action on that and be generous, which then in turn, so it's a beautiful cycle to get into. Now, to reduce our cortisol levels, we need to breathe. We need to just take a pause rather than react. So respond rather than react. We can press the reset button at any time during the day. That's what a fantastic concept. The whole day doesn't have to be ruined because of one event. We can press the reset button, just taking 5 minutes out with no stimulus, no phone, no computer, nothing, just sitting, preferably in the sunshine, because that's also going to stimulate melatonin levels, which are also a natural relaxant, and also having structure reduces cortisol levels because it provides some certainty.
I think that's really interesting, actually, Ingrid. There's a few things that you said there that really resonated with me. One is the structure, because we sit at home or wherever we're sitting doing our work, and it's very easy for the perception of the world to just narrow, and we've got nothing there and nothing we can do. We don't have a structure, the beginning of the day, the end of the day, it all blurs into one. And one of the things when we're stressed is we breathe faster. And I was listening to a podcast recently about breathing, where the person who was presenting was saying how important it is just for 2 to 3 minutes to breathe less. And he said, ideally, you want to be taking 5 to 6 breaths a minute, not the 12 to 20 that we often do take. because, and he makes the analogy that it's rather like running a car and you're driving it in first all the time, or the revs are really high. So slow it down and just take some time, because what that does is it decreases your stress levels, and can have a significant impact during the day. So I really second what you're saying in those areas.
Oh, that's magnificent, Richard, because I think by being, you have to be conscious, you have to be completely present to do that as well. I think that's a real, I think I'm going to write that down. Because I think that's a bit of a hack into, you know, really tapping into our breath. Yeah. That's a great suggestion.
I suppose while you're writing that down, my second question is during these times where we are in lockdown, or even if we're not in lockdown, the people that we want to see, we're probably only seeing remotely. We're seeing them on video. So if anybody in this webinar is in Queensland, say, well, I'm not locked down, you know, that's fine and maybe fine. But if the people that you're seeing are all in lockdown, maybe that has an impact as well. So during these times, what can sales leaders do to really help their sales teams be effective?
Yeah, coming back to structure, you know, that's the number one thing. One of the formats that I strongly recommend for sales leaders at this time, I've got the 5 C's to really creating, you know, a high performing sales culture remotely, because even if you're in freedom in WA, South Australia, or Queensland, it is important, isn't it, Charles? Yes, he agrees that structure is really important. You know, and I think the other thing about structure is it creates that level of certainty and psychological safety. So people kind of know what to expect when it comes to the way that we're going to lead them. So the 5 C's are clarity, capability, communication, community, and then coaching. So for a sales leader, you know, clarity is really about providing clear purpose, you know, where we're going to go looking for our opportunities, who we're going to target, how we're going to target, and what we're going to use when it comes to our toolkit to capture those, and providing that. So sometimes we make assumptions as sales leaders that our team, they know what they're doing, and we leave our high performers alone. We think, oh, look, I don't want to micromanage, but actually that can also be perceived as no support. So we need to make sure that we're looking after our most productive assets in our team, the people that are trying the most, trying the hardest and achieving the most, as well as the people that might need a little bit more support. So then capability. Has our team got skills for the current context and beyond? Because it's not going to, we talk about going back to normal. Normal as we knew it is over. There will be a brand new way of operating, which will kind of be straddling, you know, remote plus, you know, in person. We need to examine the people that we have on it, you know, in our teams as well. Have we got the right people here with the right capabilities, with the right attitudes? You know, in our teams, have we got the right systems and processes, and also knowledge? You know, how can we foster that? Communication, meeting others where they're at. You know, how do we communicate consistently as well with our team and with individuals within our team? The 4th C is community, and you know, we talk about that oxytocin bit there. As sales leaders, that's up to us to foster, to create the environment where we can foster community, a team community, you know, a peer-to-peer community, providing social mechanisms within that and support, and also, you know, introducing things like a buddy system, so that it's not just all reliant on us, but that we're enabling and empowering some of the people in our team to have some stretch by being a buddy to somebody else. And then finally, that coaching piece. So being a better coach, you know, in field, what do we do when it's remote? That can be a little bit tricky, but there are ways around it. How do we coach individuals? How are we coaching our team? Have we kind of all let it go by the wayside just because we're remote? No need to. We just work differently. And also fostering peer coaching, again, which is another way of stretching those people who are already fantastic at what they do, but just need that little bit of an extra to kind of go after, to develop themselves, to round out their skill sets.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think I'm going to talk about some of those things in a slightly different way, but I think you and I are on the same page with the importance of all those. And almost because we're remote, there's more importance needs to be put on coaching and on communication and things like that rather than less.
Yes.
Right? Yeah,
absolutely, Richard, absolutely. So let's come to you, because I agree there's so much that we are on the same page about, which is why we're here. But why do you think that sales teams are finding remote selling, so challenging?
I think everything is, well, it's a bit of a cliched thing to say, but everything has changed in sales. Not everything, but a lot has changed, especially while we're in lockdown. So meetings have moved online rather than face to face, and there's a different dynamic in that. It's not the same in terms of building rapport, but also prospects don't always turn up to online meetings, and that can be really frustrating, to say the least. So as a salesperson, you plan out your day, what you're going to do, and we start the day off thinking, all right, I've got several really good prospects to see, and then two of them or three of them don't show up. And suddenly your day doesn't look quite as good as it did. And with that is, as soon as a prospect doesn't show up like that, you've got 45, 50 minutes of blank space, and what you're going to do in that time. And all of a sudden you go, gee, what do I fill this time with? And it can be very demoralizing when you're trying to hit your sales targets. And as I said, the face-to-face meetings themselves are different. And no matter what anybody says, you don't, in a face-to-face meeting, you really don't have the prospect's undivided attention. Because it's so easy for them to just check an email. And we've all experienced it, I'm sure, where you're sitting in a meeting, you're talking to somebody, and they get this glazed look, and you go, they're checking an email, something's going on in you, right, something like that. So you've lost the prospect for that period. And it's not that building rapport is different or difficult. And I think you can do that just as well. It's maintaining the attention of the prospect when you're on a sales call that's different, because it's so easy for them to multitask without being caught out. Yes. So I think those are two things. The third thing I think is that filling the day can also be difficult, whether you're a salesperson or a sales manager managing a sales team. If a sales person was typically on the road, they'd see, depending on how good they were and how big their territory was, they'd see 4, 5, 6 prospects a day, have meetings. Now, I understand there are some salespeople who are managing an area, and they'll see quite a lot more than that in a day. But typically, if you're prospecting, you see maybe 4 to 6 in a day. But you take the travel out of it, and you go, right, okay, well, I can see 4 to 6 people online by lunchtime. What am I going to do during the rest of the day? And this is what you said too, giving people structure. They need effectively about twice as many sales leads as they did when they were driving around seeing people. But it's not as easy as just, okay, well, I'll double my leads. That if they could double their leads, you'd put twice as many salespeople on when they're face to face, and you'd get really great sales results. So how do they fill their day? They can't necessarily see new prospects. They can't just, well, I'll call on my customers twice as often, because they're getting tired with online meetings as well. So it's filling that day becomes really hard for salespeople, I think. And then the last thing I think that happens, just to compound that, is that the sales process takes longer, because the prospects take longer to get their peer group together to approve and sign off on the deal. And so things take longer to close, and you feel that everything's stagnating. And with the lockdown that we've had, certainly in New South Wales, this is going to be for a month. And so people in that situation will often go, I won't make the decision now, I'll leave it till we come out of lockdown. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, it's another month. Oh, well, I'll just leave it until we come out. So that delay. And I think all of those things are making it very hard for salespeople to cope with how to sell and how to manage their time and be effective during lockdown.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, Richard. You know, that decision inertia is very real.
Yes.
And for some reason, I think that, you know, particularly in New South Wales, I think that that pathway out of this, they just need to know, A, that it's going to end, which it is, but, you know, kind of when and what that might look like, because without that level of certainty, it makes it very difficult for them to plan, allocate resources and determine whether or not they're going to be in a position to take on anything new. So for salespeople to have an understanding of that's really important, and then having, you know, the wherewithal, you know, to deal with that, I think is absolutely critical. So
yes, agreed.
So, all right. So what can we do to help sales teams deal with these challenges, and how do we give them their mojo back?
Well, look, I think you summed it up very nicely with your 5 C's, right?
Yeah.
5 C's, and I think that's probably the platform on which everything else everything hangs. My take on that, or my take on that is, give them their mojo back is to make the job enjoyable, which means they need to feel successful and they need to be doing worthwhile work. Yeah. So the worst thing you could do with a salesperson is, look, we don't have enough for you to do in selling. Let's get you to go and, I don't know, enter some invoices into the accounting package. It's not worthwhile work. So you've got to find things for them that they're going to fill that day. It's going to make it enjoyable and make them feel valued, and that they're actually delivering value to the company. Yeah. So the first place I would start is look at what is holding them back. And this will vary from salesperson to salesperson. And if you're a salesperson, then you'll look at your process and go, what's holding me back? So one of the simple things would be, if online meetings are cancelling, so they're set up but the person doesn't attend, devise a process to improve that attendance at those meetings. So you just need a robust process. The reason people don't attend meetings is often because they've just walked away from their computer for 5 minutes or something's come up. It's not that they don't want the meeting, but you just have to find a way to re-engage with them and get it back on track. Yeah. So build a process that is going to make sure that you maximize the number of meetings that go ahead. Yeah. I think the next one is to give people metrics. This comes back to your goals, your point on goals. Give them metrics and KPIs that they can work towards. And the important thing from my perspective is that they should be activity-based metrics or goals, not outcome. Because if you say to a salesperson, I want you to go and make 5 sales this week, this month, this year, it's very hard to make a sale. But the numbers behind that will drive, the activity behind that will drive the performance. So to make a sale, you might need to issue 20 proposals. To get 20 proposals, you might need to meet with 40 people. To meet with 40 people, you might need to speak to 100 prospects to get those meetings. So if those are the numbers, or whatever those numbers are, give the metrics that will drive that. So I want you to talk to 100 prospects this week, this month. I want you to have 40 meetings this month. I want you to have 20 proposals sent out. Those numbers will drill down to deliver those sales. But give them, if you're a sales manager, give yourself, if you're a salesperson, activity-based and meaningful KPIs to aim for, because those are the levers that you can pull to help you get the sales. So how many prospects are you going to call per day? How many are you going to speak to? So you make the phone call, but they're not available. So you've called them, that's great, but you haven't spoken to them. How many are you going to speak to per day? Yes. How many sales meetings are you going to book from that? How many meetings are actually going to go ahead? And how many proposals are you going to issue from that? Yes. If you've got those numbers, there's 2 things that happen. Firstly, you have that goal. This is what I need to do, and the process, and it feels worthwhile. Secondly, if your numbers are not what I'll call right, so in other words, they're skewed somewhere, it's because something in there is not working. So you're doing all of the numbers, but the meetings aren't being held. Okay, you need to find a better process to make sure that the meetings go ahead. Make the measurement period short, so it's a day or a week, so it's something that can be achieved. It's not, I've got to do this over a year and the numbers are so big.
Yeah.
Keep it relevant, and then track that with your sales team. And if you're the individual, track it yourself to see how you're performing towards your goal.
Yeah.
And out of those numbers, you'll identify the problems that each salesperson is facing, which will be sometimes they'll be the same, sometimes they'll be different. So somebody is finding that they're making lots of phone calls, but they're not speaking to many decision makers. Somebody else may be speaking to lots of decision makers, but not getting any proposals. So something is happening in that step before that number is generated that is holding them back, and you can work on that with each person to train them and to communicate and motivate with them.
Yeah.
The next thing is coming back to that worthwhile work is how do you fill their days and give them structure, as you talked about. So if a salesperson has a meeting coming up and it's meant to go for an hour, let's say, and that prospect doesn't show, what can a salesperson immediately turn to that's going to be worthwhile, enjoyable, and make them feel that they're doing the right thing and valued?
Yeah.
So is it do they pick up the phone and start prospecting? Is it that they recontact some of their older accounts? Is it that they go out and talk to some of their smaller accounts? What is it that they can be doing to fill that time, rather than sitting there at home going, geez, I don't know what to do now, and I really feel I'm wasting my day, which really saps your energy and your motivation. And as you talked about with the different chemicals in your body, it puts those into the wrong balance. Give them that worthwhile work so that it makes it easy for them to keep busy during their work day. And always remember that activities drive sales, so keep them focused on those activities as much as you can. And I think you touched on this about the importance of communication. I think when we're in lockdown or when we're working remotely from people, communication is so much more important. I think we need to over communicate, and in some ways we probably need to over motivate people, and that motivation and feedback, whether it's to targets or to numbers achieved or whatever it is so important. Absolutely. And in the 80s, I used to be a big fan of Zig Ziglar, and one of the things that he said was, and I'm going to try and quote him here, which I've written it down, so hopefully I can quote him here. He said, people say that motivation doesn't work. No, sorry, people say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. I thought it's so true that you kind of go, yeah, I motivated that person last week, they'll be fine. Actually, take the time to motivate people. So the things I think that are important, just to sum up, are look at activities, look at processes, keep people busy, give them worthwhile tasks to keep themselves focused. And if you're a salesperson yourself and you're going, how do I do this for myself? It's exactly the same thing. Work out, what are your numbers? What can you keep yourself busy with that is worthwhile, keeps you moving forward, and you've got some goals set so that you can see this out, and don't become despondent just because people take a bit longer to make decisions. Everybody's doing that. And just remember that if every other salesperson is hanging up their hat because they're going, I don't know what else to do, I've run out of things to do, and you're the one person who is going out there and beating the drum and banging the bush, or banging the drum and beating the bush probably would be better. And you're the person who's going to succeed because everybody else has given up, and you're the person who's going out there and going, I'm not giving up, I know this is going to work, and you will absolutely reap the benefits down the track.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just a really big fan of, I think during these times, of using a more directive sales leadership style, just being really clear about, those targets, coming back to that clarity, that structure, the communication. And may I even say it, that celebration of the things that, that people are actually doing. Jules also quoted another Ziegler quote: "When you stop working, you're dead." And he's also quoted Matt, I'm going to murder this name, Erksley, said that activity drives the dream. And I think for salespeople, we need to feel like, you know, we're making progress. You know, Tony Robbins says progress equals happiness. And I totally agree with that. And if you don't feel like we've got that meaningful work, which you talked about, Richard, you know, we've just got busy work. We're not really moving the needle forward, and it really is important.
I totally agree. And somebody, I think Charles said, is finding many salespeople relying far too much on LinkedIn for lead gen, and they can be speaking to the wrong market. I totally agree. I think there is a place for LinkedIn, there's a place for email, but at the end of the day, sales are made when people talk to each other,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah, and I think that's so important. And I think it's about, you said at the beginning, having goals, having activity that supports those goals, and then being motivated, whether you're motivating yourself or you're motivating your sales team that they're achieving. So we have come right to the end. We've overrun by a minute or so, which we shouldn't do. But I think some really good feedback from some of the people who've been watching today. So thank you for that. We are recording this webinar, so we'll make it available to everybody later on this week, hopefully on Thursday. Ingrid, any final words to wrap up with from you?
No, I'd just really like to say thank you for this opportunity. I hope that the information's been, you know, really valuable to some of the people. The feedback indicates that it has been. And, you know, there's nothing that beats a person-to-person communication. And I think that that's what some of the later comments are saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for anybody who wants to know, our next webinar, number 7, will be on Tuesday, the 16th of November at 9 o'clock. So we will be sending information out to everybody. If you've got any ideas, some things you'd like us to cover, please let us know, either to Ingrid or myself on here on the chat, or by email if you would like to reach either of us. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Ingrid, it's lovely to see you again. It's always great to work with you. And thank you so much for being a part of this with me. I think it's a great combination. I really enjoy working with you each week.
Likewise. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Richard.
All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.